Good evening. My name is Kevin Clayton, and I'm the Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement for the Cleveland Cavaliers. On behalf of the Cavs and the NBA, we welcome you to our kickoff for Team Up for Change. Team Up for Change is a 3-year-old league initiative where NBA teams across the country are partnering with the communities in which we live to unite, inspire, and activate positive change. We have three desired outcomes in our discussion tonight. One of which is we want to discuss the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County's resolutions on racism as a public health crisis. Secondly, we want to examine community and governmental systems that need to be addressed to eradicate racism in our community. And lastly, we'll discuss the role of professional sports teams and what role can we and should we play in convening the community for change. I have a few housekeeping logistics before we start our conversation. The conversation we will have is in two parts. First, we will discuss kind of the city's perspective on their resolution. We then will talk to the county leadership to talk about the county's perspective on the resolution that they also had passed. The reason why this is an important conversation is that ever since the world has been hit by COVID-19, we've actually had a dual pandemic. As everyone continues to feel the impact of COVID-19, the George Floyd murder also has forever changed the societal and racial justice landscape in America. Now let's go ahead and bring on our guests. First, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor of Cleveland, Frank Jackson, and Cleveland's head law enforcement officer, Chief Calvin Williams. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us. Mayor
Thanks for
Jackson, I'm
having
just
us.
going to go ahead and great, thank you. Mayor Jackson, I'm just going to jump right on in. In June, the city unanimously passed Resolution 296-2020, which was declaring racism as a public health crisis. Why was this important to you? And also, why is this important to the city of Cleveland?
Well, it's important because it actually recognizes, as you know, the conversation around racism being a public health issue is not new. It's been around a while. But what this has done is made it official that in terms of government, we recognize that it is a public health issue. That then, once we have established that, then we can do some things to address it, and it helps get people out of denial.
Okay, so the passing of it as a formalized acknowledgement through resolution does create a different tension, would you say, and provide different resources that allows us to address the issues?
Well, it first is the recognition of it, and once we
Okay.
recognize it, is like anything where you have to make systemic changes, and that are not necessarily changes that go easy with institutions or even people. There has to be an acknowledgement that you have the problem, and that's what it was. It's an acknowledgement because, as I said, uh, the issue around racism being a public health issue has been around for a while. So from here,
Mhm.
we don't longer have to have that discussion as to whether or not it exists. Is it admission of and the recognition of that it does exist? So now the question is, well, what are we going to do about it?
Okay. So Chief Williams, how does the passing of this resolution and the recognition of racism being a public health crisis, how does that how does that affect law enforcement and community policing?
Well, Kevin, I think for us, it starts the conversation. It starts officers to thinking about what does that actually mean? And, for a lot of people, it's kind of a new concept. But, for Black and brown people in this country, we know that, things like racism affect our health. And studies have shown that. And the mayor and the administration talk a lot about toxic stress, and racism is one of those toxic stressors that are kind of ingrained in a lot of urban communities by the people that live in those communities and what those folks experience day in and day out. So with officers in community policing, it's another conversation tool, something that we can talk to people about. We don't want to be clinicians and talk about, how the health aspects of racism affect people, but having that in the back of our minds when we're talking to folks about different issues, be it a domestic violence issue, be it a substance abuse issue, officers can actually have that in the back of their minds when they're making decisions on how we actually interact with folks out there. So it definitely starts the conversation.
Okay, so very similar to as the mayor had just shared, it does give us a point of leverage. We recognize it, it's out there, it's now we can't hide from it as a community. So the fact that it's there, we realize that, okay, we've called it out. That does give us an opportunity to, as you said, now do something about it. So, Chief, you and I have had conversations in the past, and after the George Floyd killing, there was a public outcry globally for police reform. There was this conversation around defund the police. However, in Cleveland, you have been leading police reform and policy change well before Mr. Floyd was killed. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in leading police reform in Cleveland?
Well, Kevin, that's a great question. And I just want to start off by saying, I'm not the leader of police reform in Cleveland. There are a lot of folks that are working on this and have been for some time. As people probably know, Mayor Jackson invited the Department of Justice into the city of Cleveland in 2013, 2014 to really take a look at how our police division does business. And that resulted in a consent decree process. So even before we start initiating that consent decree process and the parameters around that, the mayor had started, former Chief McGrath, and then myself on a path towards making sure that we have change within the Cleveland Division of Police. And as the mayor likes to say, change that's in the DNA of officers around here, and not just change just for sake of checking off the boxes. So a lot of the things that we've done are around uses of force, of course. A lot of the things that we've done are around crisis intervention, stop, search, and seizures, and community engagement, which I think is the biggest component of the things that have come not just out of consent decree, but out of us realizing that we have to have a better relationship with our community. Not to say that our officers don't, but officers day in and day out try to make those relationships and those interactions better with our community. So some of the things that we've done are to bring in our partner agencies, those agencies within the borders of the city of Cleveland. But also, we've started an initiative here recently to bring the entire county within line with some of the things we're doing as far as use of force. And we're going to start there. And hopefully we can branch that out into people in mental health and substance abuse crisis, as well as stop, searches, and seizures and community engagement, so that every law enforcement agency within Cuyahoga County is on the same page when it comes to how we treat our community. Because there are really no borders. People travel from city to city, from parts of the state to parts of the state. So, our effort is to make sure that we have the best training, that we have the best policy, that we're thinking about 21st century policing and what that actually means, and not just after George Floyd, because that was a huge impetus on a lot of agencies getting on board. But even before that, we had a lot of folks thinking along those lines of what do we need to do to make sure that we're treating the community appropriately, and that we have the input, not just from the community, but from other stakeholders around, to make sure we have the best policy, the best training, the best equipped officers, and the right officers for the policing that has to be done in an urban community.
Yep. So thank you, Chief Williams. So what challenges have you had in kind of the vision of 21st century policing? What kind of things are you faced with?
I think the biggest challenge is really the time factor. We all, the community, the police officers, the great police officers out there that want us to do better, want people to see that we can do better and that we have a ton of great officers, as well as the administration. We want it done yesterday. Our biggest challenge is, it takes time to do the research, to implement the policies, to implement the training, and to actually see that training take hold and show dividends. And I know it's extremely hard to tell the community, be patient, be patient. We're working on it. We're getting some things done. But I think we have done a lot here in the city of Cleveland, as far as uses of force, our community engagement, things like that, that we have, and we can show the numbers on things like that that have changed, that have started to turn around in the right direction and getting closer to where we actually want those things to be.
One of the things that you've enlightened me on, and you just stated it, was how many different law enforcement agencies there are in the state, but also in Northeast Ohio. So Cleveland can actually make some changes and have some progress, but you said it's not done in a vacuum. So what needs to happen for also the surrounding jurisdictions to kind of fall in line as well? And I think you may have made some breakthroughs recently around that.
Yeah, and I don't want to, Kevin, steal anybody's thunder. I know there's going to be probably an
Okay.
announcement on this, but the County Chiefs Association, which of course Cleveland is a member of, and the other municipalities in Cuyahoga County have come to some agreements on what we do as far as use of force and how we treat people in our community. And like I say, that's just the start. We want to get on the same page, have basically the same policies, at least the same core values, the same core 5 to 8 to 10 things within all of our policies that speak to the things that we've talked about here over the last 6 months, and definitely things that we've been talking about in Cleveland over the last almost 5.5 years. And it speaks to what our community is asking for. It speaks to what good officers are asking for as far as policy, training, equipment, so that they can know that they can go out there and do their jobs in the correct way. And those things are coming on our county level. And I know those things are coming on the state and hopefully pretty soon the national level.
All right. Well, we enthusiastically stand by and wait for that announcement, and obviously want to do what we can. And Mr. Mayor, you actually spoke to our team right after Mr. Floyd's death, and you spoke about the issues of racism being bigger and deeper than just law enforcement. And I actually agree with you, because when we talk about systemic racism, it's not just law enforcement. You have alluded a little bit about that in your opening remarks. Can you expand a little bit more about the systemic issues that need to be addressed that will help us to eradicate racism in our community?
Well, to follow up on what the chief has said, in order to make institutional systemic changes, you have to change culture. And to change the culture, you have to change the way in which people think. And in the interim, while you're doing that, you have to have clear guidelines and rules in place that really keeps people within boundaries. And the same thing applies if you're talking about the community in general. It's not just racism, it's about inequities, disparities, and racism. They're the three things that go together. There's three legs to this stool. And you cannot really resolve one without resolving the other two. And so that puts us more into something that's just not based on race. It's based on economic status. It's based on the inequities around healthcare, inequities around education, inequities in terms of job opportunity, career opportunities, and wealth creation, and the disparities that exist in all of those areas. And when you apply race to it, it gets even deeper for people of color. And once you do that, it's almost like you institutionalize a subculture and a subgroup in perpetual poverty and perpetual lack of education and perpetual lack of opportunities. And those are very difficult things for institutions, whether they're public or private, to address. And what usually happens in that regard is that the general public and even specific parts of the private sector will look at government as the solution, which is the biggest mistake. Government is only part of the solution. To really resolve the cultural, institutionalized inequities, disparities, racism, this is a true public-private partnership to get that done. And again, that implies around issues around uh, toxic stress and toxic environments that are created in social and economic disparities and inequities that are created. And again, when you apply race on top of that, those who fall in those specific race categories are even more impacted by the institutionalized culture that perpetuates the inequities, disparities, and that racism. I know it's a general question, I mean, a general answer, but is the way in which we attempt to approach this as following up what the chief said, because if you have 1,600 police officers, you have in those 1,600 police officers, you have people of a varying opinions from the far left to the far right and everything in between. And I would say to you that in any organization, whether they're a sports team or corporation or philanthropic community, when you have people who are part of those institutions and corporations and businesses, you'll have the same thing. You will have from the entire spectrum from the far left to the far right. So the question is, how do we get people into a common attitude about addressing those underlying things that result in inequities, disparities, and racism? And that is have a clear guideline, a clear understanding as to what should be done, and the holding of people in institutions and organizations accountable for their failure to do so.
So, Mr. Mayor, since the resolution and since you've been focusing on this, what has happened? And I know the resolution you just passed that in June. Has there been anything that you can talk to our listeners around some of the things that have been put in place, either systems or processes to begin this accountability that you referenced, or anything else? Is there anything that has happened since the resolution actually?
Well, I would tell you that just as the chief mentioned that before it became a national thing about what should be done around the use of excessive force with George Floyd, the police department was doing some things, and we were doing things even before the resolution was passed in council, simply because we recognize it to be a problem all the time. And so we did things such as our community benefits agreement that has, as part of when we invest money in development projects and assist corporations and companies, how do they ensure that there is some equitable outcome in how they treat businesses, Cleveland-based business or businesses of color or female business. When we looked at our education system, and we did our 2012 school reform that we have instituted, where we've changed graduation rates from 50% to now 80%. Those are things that we were doing when we're looking at the toxic environments and toxic stress that is created in those environments, and we began to look at health in a way that put trauma coaches in the rec centers to help identify young people who are suffering from toxic environment through the traumatization because of post-traumatic stress resulting from witnessing or participating in living in environments of violence. And how do we get them services? So we're doing things. What this does, it helps us to formalize it and brings the entire community together, public, private, philanthropic, to say, yes, we have this problem. We all have stated it and we confirmed that we have this problem. So now let's work together to resolve the problem. And that is where this resolution is, and putting the infrastructure together to have it be clear as to what the expectations are from government, private sector, philanthropy, and some kind of measurement of how people are performing in that way. That is where the infrastructure is being set up for that now. that is not being completed. There are people who are involved in that, but we as a city have been working on these things all the time.
Yeah, so thank you. I now want to shift the conversation and shift the responsibility. And Mayor Jackson, you said it's not just government.
No.
And as I think you all know, that your three major professional sports teams here, the Browns, Indians, and Cavs, have formed an alliance to collaborate to address social and racial issues in our community. And we understand that we have a role to play with you. And oftentimes people will ask, well, why are sports even involved? Why aren't you all just playing on the field or playing on the court? Almost kind of shut up and dribble. And we know we have a responsibility that goes beyond just the entertainment value that we provide our fans. And that's part of what this conversation is about. What role do our sports teams play? And Mr. Mayor, if I could start with you, and Chief Williams, I want to get your thoughts as well. What would you like to see your three major sports teams do in support of what you're trying to get done as it relates to eradicating racism in our community?
Well, I believe that you've started already with your statement, and your statement is that it's not somebody else's responsibility. I own my share of that responsibility, and with that, that goes a long way. That goes a long way, believe me. And so, and it leads to the question that you asked. To me, it is how do the sports team look at the power and influence that they have in terms of moving the public opinion, or influencing young people, or establishing some kind of expectation and norms. And that is something that these sports teams and the sports figures have, that even elected officials do not have that type of influence and authority, because you can persuade people, you can influence people, particularly young people. And then on an organizational level, you
Sports
can
figures have that even elected officials do not have that type of influence and authority, because you can persuade people, you can influence people.
well, I don't know if this thing is working right now, but because I'm getting feedback.
I
But
hear you now.
anyway, okay, but let me say the other part to it is your organizational structure, and how you procure millions of dollars of goods and services on an annual basis. And I know in terms of corporate efficiency and bottom line profits, that it is that you might want to do it one way, but now what you can do is you can look at as a sports industry in Cleveland. How are you spending the millions of dollars, or who are you spending it with? And how are you doing that in a way that allows for wealth creation and job opportunities and career opportunities, to bring young people into your organization, not just on entry level positions, but throughout your operation, from the entry level all the way up to your corporate administration, for exposure and internships, and allowing them to learn the trade. These are the kind of things that you can do, that on an everyday basis, and will make a difference in the long run, and people will follow your lead, because you are leaders, you're trendsetters, you're the ones that people will look to. And so, the sports teams are doing it right. We need to do this also.
All right. So you stated provide young people with exposure from a job standpoint, actual
Yeah.
hiring and promotion.
And I think mentoring and internship, like
Yep.
young people in high school, I find that many young people don't know the choices they have in life, because they're not exposed to any other option but what they know out on the street, and those options don't lead them to a good outcome. And allowing them to see that not only are there other options, but they have the ability to exercise and use those options where they would not have known that but for the fact that you gave them an internship. The same thing with maybe kids, young people in colleges that are studying a particular area, whether it's in financing or sports medicine or whatever it may be, to expose them as to how you do your business will take them a long way in helping them to make the right decision and to make choices based on options that they now see because they've been exposed.
Okay.
And that happens in all corporations, whether it's government, we do it, whether it's in the private sector, with corporations and businesses, or in the sports field, philanthropic field, it's the same principle.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you may have froze on me. Chief Williams, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. I think the mayor's having some technical difficulties. So Chief Williams, can I get your thoughts on what you would like to see from the sports teams?
Kevin, and we've talked about this before also. I think what we would like to see as far as law enforcement is really that connectivity piece with our community. To really have the folks, like the mayor says, that have some influence on our young folks and on our community as a whole, actually get out there and have those conversations that we've been having for the last month and a half. Make sure that connect with folks, that we keep that connection going, and that we actually start to put in the paper and start to put some things in place. Again, like we've already started here with our sports team. Our community needs to know that there are folks out there that care, and there are folks out there that really, really want to see a change. And if we can just start those conversations, if we can have those small group discussions, if we can have those agencies and organizations that have been in this fight for a long time really sit down and start working together, and we have the opportunity to make huge and substantive change in this country. Definitely starting here in Cleveland and like some of the other NBA cities around the country.
Okay, well, great. And Chief, I still have you with me in closing, and I'm going to go to the mayor right after this. Yep. Chief, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead.
Okay. So in closing, and Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask you to close out this piece as well. Given that we have the citizens of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio and other places that are listening, what would you ask them to do to help us in eradicating systemic racism in Cleveland?
Yeah, that's a huge question, Kevin. I think for me, it really comes down to what I kind of previously said. I think it comes down to let's not miss this opportunity. We have a lot of folks involved. We have a lot of folks that can really make real change listening, wanting to do something that's real, that's effective, that's lasting. Let's not miss this opportunity. I'm all for First Amendment rights. I'm all for us voicing our concerns. But I think it's time for us to put pen to paper, to put boots on the ground to actually get some work done. This problem, like we talked about in the police reform aspect, it's something that's not easy to do. You can't do it overnight. It's going to take time. And we need to not waste any of that time and really start getting some things done.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Mayor Jackson, what message would you like to share with the citizens of Cleveland as to what they can do to help eradicate systemic racism in our community?
Well, not to believe or think that you should solve it all by yourself or all at once, but to just do your part. And as the chief said, everyone's got a good conversation, but conversation is not going to solve this. This will take people putting work in. And wherever you are, then that's where the work you should put in. If you're at a level where you can make institutional change and sweeping changes in organizations, institution, or in government, then exercise that power and authority to do that. If you're just a person who can only do so much at a certain level, wherever you are, do what you can do to ensure that you make those changes. Uh, so don't believe that you're going to be able to talk our way out of this. It's going to take work, and it's going to take work at every level. And people should, whatever authority and influence people have, they have to exercise and use it in order to make the kind of changes we need to make.
Well, very, very wise words. So, in closing, and if I could just sum up this segment of the conversation, for me, the takeaway is that in order for us to actually eradicate racism in our community, it isn't government, it isn't law enforcement, it isn't sports teams. It's going to take everybody in the community to bring their piece of the puzzle to the table and do what we can. And what's in our sphere of influence, we need to exercise that. Mayor Jackson, Chief Williams, on behalf of the Cavaliers and the NBA and our kickoff to Team Up for Change, thank you for getting us off to a great start. Thank you both.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question before
Please.
we sign out?
Yes,
you
yes,
got
sir.
Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston back there. Is that your picture?
Of course.
Right,
That's right there. So this is not a facade. This is actually a real bookshelf.
All right.
So yeah, that is my hero.
I remember the day. All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you for recognizing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. Okay. We now are going to have a conversation with the leadership in Cuyahoga County. We are now joined by Cuyahoga County Executive Armond Budish, and Mr. Eddie Taylor will be joining us, and he wears many hats as a civic leader in our community, but today he joins us as the chair of the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity. Gentlemen, welcome.
Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Is your camera on by chance?
It shows that it is. I'm sorry.
No worries. There you go.
Okay.
So we just saw you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I know the county executive was in the waiting room.
Can you see me or hear me?
I can hear you for sure. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Budish, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
So how about if I start off the conversation with you, Mr. Budish? And in June, the Cuyahoga County also passed a resolution, 2020-0122, declaring racism as a public health crisis. In the resolution, it clearly talked to the racial disparities of our human services and the systems that are disparate versus black and brown folks versus whites. Systems such as healthcare, criminal justice, food deserts, economic empowerment, and many more. The county, though, began looking at these systems well before COVID and also George Floyd's killing. Mr. Budish, can you share with us why this was an important act to pass for you, and also what does it mean for the county?
Sure. And first of all, thank you for hosting this, and thanks to the sports teams for providing this opportunity to talk about this very important issue. For the county to thrive, we need everybody to thrive. We can't leave anybody out, can't leave black and brown people behind. If we're going to reach our full potential, it's got to be everybody. So as you said, the county, it's not new to this concern. We've had this concern. We've been working on this for as long as I've been in this office. And much of what we do is oriented towards equity, towards evening the playing field and making sure that we are including everybody in the chance to thrive in this county. So, for example, I'll give you a few examples. We've spent millions of dollars to expand high-quality pre-kindergarten, focused largely on minority children. Education, as the mayor was just saying, is critically important, and there's been disparities. We're trying to work on that. We spent millions of dollars to support small businesses owned by people of color. That's critically important. We've spent millions of dollars to provide COVID testing in underserved minority areas. We've spent millions of dollars, and we continue to spend millions of dollars to try to close the digital divide. We've provided thousands of hotspots with connectivity to the internet. We've provided thousands of laptops, and that's all been to areas where there's great need in the minority areas with kids at home largely who need connectivity to be able to participate in their education, especially now with the difficulties in attending in person. So we're not new to this. It's extremely important, and we put a high priority on trying to continue to improve the lives of everybody in this county. I will tell you that as much as we've done, there's a lot more to do, and we know that, and we're trying to do everything we possibly can. And I appreciate the work of Eddie Taylor, who you'll hear from in a minute, and others that are helping us.
Yep. So thank you. And actually, Mr. Taylor, let me go to you. You actually lead the Advisory County on Equity. Can you tell us a little bit about that council? What is the mission? What is the purpose? And what kind of progress have you made? And I know you just started recently within, I think, June or so, but can you talk a little bit about your role in the council and its accomplishments?
No, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, by the graciousness and the good compliments of the other folks on the council, they named me chair of the council. So I'm speaking to you today in that role, as you mentioned. But I want to start with some of the things mentioned by the county executive. He is absolutely right. This work by the county has been going on for years, and it's been furthered, of course, by the good actions and activity, not only of the county executive, but the county council. So the mission, quite honestly, of this council is to work in support of the good efforts already being displayed by the county council and the county executive. So our goal ultimately is to provide input, advice where necessary, advisory services to the county executive and the county council surrounding their already started work on equity, inclusion, and access. So while they have internal efforts already underway, and those efforts are going well, this is an examination, a review, if you will, of some of the external efforts. We have 17 total members in the county council, this equity council. And the beauty of what we're doing, and again, we thank the executive and the council, so we've got these 17 individuals who are pillars in this community to begin with, representing human resources professionals, health and healthcare service professionals, physicians. We have the religious community between retired pastors and a rabbi on the council. We have economic development folks. We have business folks. And then we have people who exist in this world and this work every day, from social services work to voting rights work to the labor unions, environmental issues, and then those who are also representative of the community of the LGBTQ community. So we are wholesome in terms of our work and the composition of this committee. We're also committed in a meaningful way. So to your point, when did we start? We started through conversations after testimony by the individuals on this council. Those conversations included the county executive, members of his staff, his senior staff in particular, and also county council representatives to hear where our views are on this particular subject. Since then, Kevin, we've gone full force into additional meetings, interviewing county staff. We are interviewing external staff. Then we're going to have what amounts to these common ground sessions over the next several days with the entire community. We've invited the entire county community, no matter what their position or what their concerns or thoughts might be, We've invited them into a discussion because that external piece is important. We can't just talk amongst ourselves. We have to hear from the entire community. So hundreds of folks have already signed on to listen to not only what we have to say as a preamble and where we are starting and where we hope to go, but they're also going to offer their thoughts, their opinions, get their questions addressed or at least put on the table. So a lot of work that's already started, but more to come. Then the output of all of this is a report that we have to deliver to, again, the county executive and the county council, and ultimately, though, to the community around our discovery. And it's not a static document. That document should grow, it should live, it should be improved because the advice has been requested. So a lot has already been done, but a great deal remains to be accomplished.
So Eddie, that was an amazing overview, and I mean, I got much more insight even as I listened to you. Mr. Budish, we've already identified, the three of us have said, these issues and the disparities are not new to Cuyahoga County. However, what is it that is different now versus the previous many years when we didn't have legislation calling racism out? Because it seems like there's a different energy now than in the past. So maybe I'm wrong, but what's different from your perspective as to why we now have this structure in place where there's a lot of motivation and enthusiasm around getting this work done?
Well, let me first say that we did legislation before calling out racism and disparities between Black and brown and white members of the community. We did a disparity study. The county council, ordered a disparity study back 5 or 6 years ago. And that disparity study came back, and as we've all noted now, there were disparities that existed. So we set out to try to remedy those disparities. Unfortunately, the law said that we were limited to legislation or executive orders, which I put through with the help of county council. We did legislation and we did executive orders, but we were told that they had to be race neutral, that they had to be aspirational. We couldn't put mandates or requirements in because that's the way the law worked. We weren't bad enough to allow us to do that. There hadn't been enough historical data to allow us to do more. At this point, we're awaiting the final results of a second disparity study. It's my guess that they will find that disparities continue because, at the time, 5 years ago, we knew that aspirational goals weren't going to be enough, and I suspect they aren't. So that's one of the big things that's changed now, is that I think we'll have the legal opportunity to do a whole lot more than we've done in the past. And second, as you note, there's a new energy, not just in Cleveland or Cuyahoga County, but around the country. People are recognizing the terrible disparities that still exist, and recognizing that something has to be done. So with that energy, we are jumped on it. We are ready to go. And as you heard from Eddie, we have a great team of people that are very energized to work on these issues. And I think we're going to come up with some real good initiatives that will allow us to change the game.
So thank you for that. So Mr. Budish, let me just ask you this, because I heard you talk about the aspirational goals, and legally you couldn't, but I'll say we as a community, we couldn't necessarily make those standards because of law. However, we're going to do another disparity study. There's one underway. Has the law changed at all that it will allow us, if the same results come from the disparity study, will it allow us legally to actually implement much harsher, or I should say much more structured goals and objectives, or not?
No, I don't believe the law has changed. What's changed is first the passage of time. The second is the fact that we have tried the neutral, race neutral efforts, the aspirational goals. And as you look around, you can see we still have, terrible disparities in this community. So I suspect that under the law, which hasn't changed, we will now be in a different position, and they'll be allowed to do a whole lot more.
Okay, and is that state law or federal law we're talking?
I think that's federal law, but the state law is consistent.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, do you want to weigh in on that at all as to, from your perspective, kind of what's changed as you in your seat versus the past maybe decade or so when we've been addressing these issues to now where it seems like, wow, there actually is going to be progress?
I agree entirely with the county executive's view of what's changed, but we also have to recognize that there was a flashpoint. Right? We have witnessed, whether we've chosen to pay attention, turn away, or not care or concern ourselves at all, we've witnessed years of issues, decades for some of us. And as we go through the periods of history, we know that some of these structural and systemic things have been around, going back to original sins. However, the flashpoint is that we were all home. Now, this doesn't speak at all to the county executive's legislative enactments and all the things that he has attempted and the council have attempted over the course of time, because those have been good efforts. But the visibility that we all got around this issue in particular, fairness and equity, things that should have concerned us over the Memorial Day holiday, certainly brought to life a whole new energy, to this conversation. And it's tragic that it took tragedy to bring some of these things to the forefront, but it also led to the business community in Northeast Ohio and beyond declaring racism a public health crisis. It led to many organizations saying the same thing and putting money and effort towards it. So while all those efforts have been tried and they will continue to be improved upon, it's clear that we all had that period in time, that moment, those visuals that created it for all of us, hopefully a stirring to new and improved activity. Look, before Minneapolis, there were other cities, including right here at home, that created issues for us. But I think this is new. In some ways, it's different. Hopefully what we have more than anything else, because of all the varied opinions and individuals who are involved, that this will be lasting. It'll make the kind of difference that we should all hope for.
And if I could just add on to what Eddie just said, what's changed? We had a black man killed on tape that everybody could see by somebody putting their leg, their foot on the throat of somebody and choking them. We had a black woman who was asleep in her house, totally innocent, shot and killed. I mean, those sorts of things do wake up a community, I have to say.
Yeah, and I'd agree. Not only a community, a state, a country, and the world. Eddie, I'd like to ask you this question from your seat, and also Mr. Budish, I'm going to ask you to comment on this as well. And I know there's not one single barrier, there's probably several barriers, but can you share with the audience who's listening to this, from your perspective as chair of the advisory committee, advisory task force, what are some of the hurdles that you see that our community has to cross, has to get over before we can truly eradicate systemic racism? I mean, what are the things that you're saying that we have to get over?
Well, some of the things that we can point to are clear. They're almost tangible, mentioned by the county executive. Sometimes we have legislative. Now, this can't all be solved by government. So I'm going to start there. Sometimes we have legislative impediments that get in the way, and the county executive has spoken to time, the passage of time, and how things can now be done differently. We in the business community certainly haven't always done the right thing around equal opportunities and supplier diversity and hiring and promotional activities and board representation. Those are clear impediments, right? We can look at the data to tell us that there isn't equity there. But right now, quite honestly, I see the biggest hurdle because so many great efforts have been started. There's an awareness that's been created, that's been elevated. Folks have signed on to all of these important declarations. The conversations are different, they are better. But the issue, as it's always been, is the fatigue that sets in, a weariness that sets in from the ongoing nature of this work. It is hard. The lift is a big one. People in certain communities want to go back to their lives, right? And have a focus which isn't necessarily on this. So the fatigue, that battle, has to be one that we all have to accept and recognize will be before us. And how do we push through it? How do we endeavor to make certain that this work is so important, that curing injustice and inequity and disparities, that work is so important to lift our community, to lift a nation, that we're not going to allow ourselves to remain fatigued. When the moments hit us, right, when we've talked about it and then talked about it more, we have to push through. For me, that is a significant hurdle that has to be dealt with and overcome.
Well said, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Budish, same question to you. From the seat that you have, and again, I know there's not one important hurdle, but what are some of the hurdles that you see?
Well, there's lots of hurdles, unfortunately. That's why we are where we are today. Probably the biggest was identified by Eddie and the mayor earlier, and that is the need to change our culture, the way people think. And that's no easy task at all. You know, as a government, we can, pass laws to make it easier to contract with minority contractors. We can pass laws to provide more educational opportunities, as we're doing with our pre-K program. That doesn't change the culture. And that's the biggest hurdle that I would identify. And you do that by the sorts of things that Eddie and our commission are setting out to do. And that is to identify the problems, to set out a pathway to solve the problems, and then to measure what we do against results and see if we're doing what we need to do.
So, Mr. Budish, I now want to shift the conversation. And you were gracious enough to meet with some of the executives from the Cavaliers. And as you know, the three major professional sports teams in the community, the Browns, Indians, and us as the Cavs, have formed an alliance. And we have formed this alliance to collaborate to address social and racial issues in our community. One of the things that I appreciate that Mr. Taylor has said, that you have said, that the mayor has said, and Chief Williams, is that this isn't just government's responsibility. This isn't just corporate's responsibility. It's all of us. And it's interesting that professional sports hasn't been brought into the conversation. And I will tell you from the conversations that we have had with some of our partners, some of our ticket holders, they don't understand, well, why is sports playing a role? And I think we do have a role. And I would just like to kind of ask you, Mr. Budish, from your perspective, what role do you see professional sports teams playing to help eradicate racism and to support what you and Mr. Taylor are referencing?
Well, first, I want to note that this collaboration that you've referred to between the Cavs, the Indians, and the Browns is truly unprecedented and can have tremendous impact on our community. So I want to thank all of you for getting together and for working together to address all kinds of issues. In terms of sports is unique. And I think of sports a little bit like I think about the military, in that it brings people together. You don't see racism in sports like you do in the general community. You have white people and black people and brown people all working together, all working to win a championship or to accomplish a goal. And that's very much like the military. You work together, your people are put together and they work together. And it's a great example for the way we should all be behaving in this community. So I think there's a great role just to be out there as sports teams and our heroes to let the kids see, let everybody see how it can be done and how it can be accomplished in the benefits that exist. There was, in terms of specifics, I want to thank the Cavs for opening up Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse for voting the other day to encourage voting. That was significant. I don't think that's ever been done before. And that sets a great example. And it's a way to send a message, and it's a way to get people out to exercise their rights under democracy. So I want to thank the Cavs for doing that. And, another thing that, the Cavs could do is give us loads of money to continue to do.
Technical difficulty. Hello.
Yes, the mic went bad. But we're doing things like a diversion program that is designed to move people out from the criminal justice system, which tends to be much more discriminatory towards minorities. We want to move people out of that system, out into the community for treatment that they need. And that's something we've talked about with your leadership. So there's a lot of things the sports teams can do, but just being out there is really enough.
So you mentioned voting, and I also want to provide you an opportunity through this platform to maybe just talk a little bit about voting and encourage. But let me show you a very, very brief PSA video that the three sports teams put together. And Mr. Taylor, I don't know if you've seen this, and Mr. Budish, I don't know if you have, but this is one of the roles, and you talked about unprecedented. I don't think sports, and I know Cleveland has not seen this level of cooperation with its three teams before. So if we could show the video, please.
Cleveland, we love hearing your voice.
While we play for different teams,
We all play for Cleveland.
Our community and country are strongest
when everyone uses their voice.
Make sure your voice is heard.
Guarantee that your voice is heard.
Make a plan to vote now.
your voice matters.
Your vote counts.
Your vote makes Cleveland stronger.
Your vote
Makes all of us stronger.
So yes, on November 3rd, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse will be, thank you. We will be hosting, I think it's three precincts that we are a venue. We're part of the community, so we want to be available for the citizens to vote. So, Mr. Budish, your commentary about voting and a message to the listeners around, anything that you like to share about the importance of that. And then, Mr. Taylor, I'm coming back to you as well.
Well, I did see that PSA on television, so I know you're running it, and it was great. It really was well done, and it really sends the right message. My message about voting is, we're talking about racism, structural racism. The best way to cure things is to vote. That's your democracy right to vote. And if you don't like your elected officials, vote. If you don't like the way we're doing things, vote. If you don't like the programs, vote. You gotta be out there. And this is your right. This is how you change things. This is the best way to change things in this community and around the country is voting. People died to vote. Talking about discrimination, people died for the right to vote. And then you look around and there's so many people who, don't take advantage of their right, and that's really sad.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, we'd really like your thoughts, and I know you are a sports fan and you've been in the community. What role do you see that the Browns, the Indians, and Cavs, through their collaborative, can play in supporting the work of your council and what you're trying to get done?
It's an important question, but let me say as well, thank you, County Executive, for the comments on voting, right? It is hard, quite honestly, to follow up on those comments because there is no more, there's no greater imperative than any of us have right now, but to exercise that fundamental right in our democracy. So thank you for those words. Thank you for that PSA. So what I'll say quickly, Kevin, is this. There are roughly 4 pillars. I named a lot of sort of domains of inequity, but 4 pillars that this council is operating under. One is criminal justice. Another is health and health care attached, economic opportunity, and then finally, quality of life. So if we think about those pillars, You know, the system of incarceration, our need for health and healthy living and health care, our need for jobs and the creation of more jobs and entrepreneurship, and then how we get around through this life, right? The places we live and recreate, all important things. So when I think about sports teams, number one, you cut across all of those things. You give folks something to aspire towards, something to root for, someone to, as the county executive said earlier, to create heroship around. All those things are in the domain of sports, and they all influence how folks view their lives, that they're fans in any way. So a couple of things. Number one, I think you've already been generous with your time and your outreach because you have this platform that provides a visibility that most of us just don't have. So that is important and key in and of itself. You've committed resources already. I know that the Cavs in particular, through its executive leadership and the coaching staff, and you, Kevin, and others have contributed to organizations in town that fuel the Black entrepreneurial spirit. How do we make better the lives of those in the African American community? That work has already started there, but you are attempting to make that work stronger. Coach Bickerstaff in particular has spent time on phone calls and Zoom calls with folks in organizations like the President's Council trying to do just that. Len Komorowski and so many others have done that work. So that is important. The Browns have done similar activities, so we give credit to the sports teams because they deserve it. But most of it is about that platform, the visibility that you have, the aspirations folks have with respect to rooting for and wanting to praise and pump up the sports team. So I say use the platform at all levels, executive leadership levels, the product on the field, the floor, and on the court. All levels, I think, can be utilized to bring the community together. So that PSA in and of itself was wonderful. Certainly there's more to do. And I'd say take advantage of the visibility, the leverage, and the platform that sports teams have. It's about money, certainly. It's also about the reach into a community through your words and your deeds and your actions.
So thank you. And Mr. Taylor, thank you for those kind words. You know, I'm very fortunate to work for an organization that long before I came on was doing great things in the community. We just have a moment in time right now where we just need to elevate and accelerate some of that work to support what the county is doing and what the city is doing. You know, as we begin to kind of come to this final lap, if you will, I want to give both of you an opportunity to share a message to our citizens, the community. And actually, Eddie, if I could ask you if there were a message or a few words that you would want to use this platform right now to share with the citizens. I know you have, so like you said, you have programming coming up this weekend where citizens can participate and their voices can be heard and some other things. So what message would you like to leave to the citizens of Cuyahoga County around how they can help and bring their puzzle piece to the table to help eradicate systemic racism for our community?
Yeah, my first comment is, Kevin, that I'm grateful. The council is grateful. The folks in this community who are participating, we're grateful because so many have already stepped up to say they want to offer their voice in this discussion. They want to help. They want to participate. So there's a great deal of gratitude that goes into this first and foremost. But we all recognize that the struggle has been long, it endures, and it will continue beyond this point. So while I'm exceptionally and exceedingly grateful, I would once again say, please continue in this journey, each and all, right? Because it is a long one and it takes full participation for us to be successful. And let's find a way to open our minds to what might be the possibilities that exist if we all are in this together. So that, in the end, is my message, a message of gratitude, a message certainly of hope, but a desire as well to say continue in this journey because it will make us all better ultimately.
Thank you. County Executive, Armond Budish, what message would you like to leave for for the citizens of Cuyahoga County.
First, I'd like to thank you, Kevin, for your great work on this and all you're doing to help us out here. I want to thank your partner, Len Komorowski, who's been great to work with, and all the sports teams who have been involved. My message to the citizens of the county is we want your input. As Eddie said, we've got 17 great people on this council that we put together, but the more input we can get, the better. The better the product will be coming out. So one thing we've done, this commission has done, is they're hosting this Common Ground platform this weekend. It's already sold out, so you can't come anymore. But we'll do it again. But if you want to still participate right now, we have a website. The website is cuyahogacounty.us/fight racism, and on that website, it's going to this survey. We're putting a survey up. It'll go up middle of next week. So don't go on it tonight, but you can go on it next week. cuyahogacounty.us/racism, fight racism, and that'll have many of the same questions that we're asking the community in these Common Ground forums. So you'll be able to get your message out. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you see is wrong. We want to hear any suggestions you have. It'll help us all 17 members of the commission. It'll help me. It'll help county council to decide what we have to do going forward. So that's my message tonight. Please help us out.
So thank you. Mr. Eddie Taylor, Cuyahoga County Executive Armond Budish, I appreciate you participating in the Cleveland Cavaliers Time to Talk series. I am honored to be able to have this conversation with you, and that hopefully our platform will be something that on a continuous basis that you can use so that we can join you in this fight against systemic racism in Cuyahoga County. We kicked off our Team Up for Change yesterday with the NBA and their national summit. Tonight, we kick off our local activation. Please check out our website for the complete schedule of events that conclude on Wednesday with a conversation with Cleveland Browns General Manager Andrew Berry, India's President Chris Antonetti, the Cavs GM Kobe Altman, special guest Fox Sports reporter and activist and former Cleveland Brown Emmanuel Acho, and the conversation will be moderated by nationally renowned sports reporter and personality Taylor Rooks. Thank you again for joining A Time to Talk. And remember, unite, inspire, and activate. Good night, Cleveland.